Welcome back. Let's continue on with Sabbath services. We're in Exodus 13. Now I want you to pay special attention to what is said here. Then we will go back and we will read Deuteronomy 16 again. And we will understand what it means. Okay? He gives the instruction here about getting all leaven out of your homes, everything. Now, verse 8. And because you keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread, here's one of the reasons. And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, This is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Okay? Now remember, they could not leave their homes on the Passover night until sunrise. Okay? And they didn't leave Egypt until when? When the 14th was ending and the 15th was beginning. Okay? That's why it's a night to be much observed to the Lord in bringing them out of the land of Egypt. Okay? Verse 9. And it shall be a sign to you upon your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. That's the whole purpose of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. For with a strong hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this law in its season from year to year. Now, here is the law. It applies going back to what was to be done on that first day of unleavened bread. Okay? And it goes forward from there when they get into the land of Canaan. Verse 11, and it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and to your fathers, to give it to you. Who was the first father that was swore to? Abraham, that's correct, right? Now notice verse 12. Here begins the key to understanding Deuteronomy 16 and the sacrifices there called Passover offerings. But it was not the sacrifice of the Passover lamb. That's what's hard to figure out about it. So let's read on, see what it is. You shall set apart to the Lord all that opens the womb, every firstborn that comes of any animal which you have, the males shall be the Lord's. And now remember, they had a lot of animals, right? They had sheep, they had goat, they had cattle, they had horses, they had donkeys, they had mules. Okay? And every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. How did they redeem it with a lamb? There was an offering for the donkey. Now notice how important that it was. And if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. Well now, a donkey or a horse or a cattle, you break its neck, you lose a lot of value, a lot of things, don't you? And all the firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. Okay? Now think about this for just a minute. How many animals would that involve over a period of time. Every year, you would have to redeem them, right? Firstborn of man or beast. Now notice verse 14. Verse 14 is identical to Deuteronomy 16. And it shall come to pass when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what does this mean? Now, what is he referring to? The redemption of the firstborn with a sacrifice. Okay? You shall say to him, the Lord brought us out of Egypt by the strength of his hand from the house of bondage. Okay? And it came to pass when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man, the firstborn of animals. Therefore, I sacrifice to the Lord all that opens the womb that are males, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. Okay? Now then, let's come to Deuteronomy 16. And let's read that again. What we are going to see is this. That Deuteronomy 16 is not a commemoration of passing over the firstborn in the houses in the land of Egypt. That's the Passover. And that's what they were to tell their son. Okay, hold your place, Deuteronomy 16, and come back to Exodus 12 here for just a minute so we can look at it. See? There's a difference in what this sacrifice was. Exodus 12, verse 25. Here's the law for the Passover. And remember, the day after Passover is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay. Verse 24. And you shall observe this thing as a law. Now, what was the law? Okay. Well, tell it. You're to take a firstborn from the kids or from the lamb or from the goats. You're to sacrifice it at your house. You're to put the blood over the doorpost and the lintel. Okay? You shall observe this thing as a law to you and your children forever. So the 14th Passover was to be observed forever and not combined with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but separate. Okay? Now notice verse 26. And it will be when your children will say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and delivered our houses. Okay? Now, that's quite different than over here in verse 13. Yeah, let's come back here to Deuteronomy 16 again. Okay. And let's notice right in verse 1. Keep the month of Abib and observe the Passover to the Lord your God. Okay. Stop. That's a separate observation. Okay? For in the month of Abib, the Lord brought your children out of the land of Egypt by night, the night to be much observed. The next night. Now you see how easy it is to confuse the nights. Okay? But as we see, as we go over it again, that the instructions are different. See? And you therefore shall sacrifice the Passover offering to the Lord your God of the flock and of the herd. Now, what day would be the best day to redeem all your firstborn? On the day portion of the Passover day, right? Because on the day portion of the Passover day was the day that they could leave their houses in the morning. Okay? So the reference here, as we will see, is not to the Passover ceremony itself, but to redeem all the firstborn of man and beast. Okay? And to acknowledge on the day portion of the Passover that God spared all the firstborn in Egypt. Okay? Man and beast. Now then, since there's so many, let's read on. It says of the flock and the herd. Now, why would it say of the flock and the herd? Okay, because all the firstborn belong to God, right? Okay. In the place which the Lord your God shall choose to place his name there, and you shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread with it. So these offerings started on the day portion of the Passover and went through the whole 7 days of unleavened bread as well. Okay? Because there were a lot born. I mean, think about it. Now, little sidebar, someone's going to say, what about the firstborn female? Okay? Because sometimes the firstborn is not a male, it's a female. Okay? That was to be redeemed, okay, and put into the feast allotment. Okay? So those could be then used by the family, see, for observing the feast. Okay? Eat unleavened bread with it, the bread of affliction, for you came forth out of the land of Egypt in haste or trepidation, has nothing to do with staying in the house while they heard all the screams of the Egyptians because the firstborn were dead. So that you may remember the day you came forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life. Unleavened bread, right? Okay. They came out when? The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay. There shall no leaven be seen with you in all your borders for 7 days, nor shall any of the flesh which you sacrifice in the first day at sunset remain all night until morning. Okay? You may not sacrifice the Passover offering within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you. So this Passover offering was the offering because of the passing over of the firstborn and the redemption of the firstborn. Had nothing to do with the Passover lamb for the Passover ceremony within the house. These were sacrifices to be given at the tabernacle or the temple. See? All right, now, let me just interject here. Okay, let's go back to Numbers 9. Now, you will see that I have a whole chapter on this, Numbers 9, starting with Numbers 1, and the dedication of the tabernacle. Okay? Now then. They finished this 2 days before the Passover. Okay? Now here's something that solidifies what we've been talking about. Numbers 9, verse 1. Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they came out of the land of Egypt, saying. Okay? So the tabernacle was set up, first day of the first month. Then you read chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's the dedication by all of the tribes for the special offering that would come in for the priesthood and the Levites. And then they numbered the firstborn of the children of Israel, and that they had that year, okay, because there were babies born all year long, right? Okay. And they counted all of those and compared them with the sons of Levi and took them as the offering of dedication for the sons of Levi. All right? Then after that, we have this. Verse 2. Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at its appointed time. Now let's look at this carefully. In the 14th day of this month, between the 2 evenings, you shall keep it in its appointed time. You shall keep it according to all its statutes. That's found in Exodus 12. And according to all its ceremony. Now this tells us what? What did they do in the houses? They took the blood of the sacrifice of the Passover lamb for the Passover and put the blood on the lintel and 2 side posts. What would they do in the wilderness? Well, they're all in their tents, right? And they have a couple of poles to hold up the opening to the tent. So if they kept it according to all the instructions that you find in Exodus 12, then they daubed some of the blood on those poles. Later, when they got into the land of Israel, when they would keep the Passover, they would keep it at home, and they would do the same thing because they were to do it according to the ordinances, see? Now, key important thing. Was the tabernacle up and ready for sacrifices? Yes. Does it show that they took the Passover lamb, all of those of the children of Israel, to the priest and Levites to sacrifice them at the tabernacle? No. Doesn't say that. It says according to all the ordinances and ceremony of it, okay? And Moses spoke to the children of Israel to keep the Passover, and they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month between the 2 evenings, between sunset and dark, in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, the children of Israel did. Okay? Now, back to Deuteronomy 16. So we know that when the tabernacle was set up, They did not bring the Passover lamb for the Passover ceremony to the tabernacle to be killed there. And all the historical accounts that I have in the Passover book shows that the 14th Passover was kept in the homes, a domestic Passover. But Deuteronomy 16 is the redemption offering of the firstborn after the first Passover. All right? Now notice, you may not sacrifice the Passover offering within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you. This Passover offering was not the Passover lamb, but the redemption offering which started on the day portion of the Passover, okay? And it was all prepared for them to eat, beginning the night to be much observed. Okay? Now, that's a hard one to follow. It took me a long time before I figured that out. But the key is this. Deuteronomy 16 is not the passing over. It's the leaving the land of Egypt. That's the 15th day of the first month, right? And before the night to be much observed, you have the day portion of the Passover, and many of them would bring their redemption offering on the day portion of the Passover to the temple to be offered there, and that's how it's called a Passover offering, but not the Passover sacrifice. See? That was always to be done in the home. All other sacrifices had to go to the tabernacle or temple. Verse 3, you shall eat no leaven with the bread. With it 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, bread of affliction, for you came forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, so that you may remember the day you came forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life. That ties right in with the instructions given in Exodus 13, correct? Yes, indeed. There shall no leaven be seen with you in all your borders for 7 days. Exodus 13, correct? Yes. Nor shall any of the flesh which you sacrifice on the first day at sunset, in preparation for what? For the night to be much observed. Okay? So we find a blending over of the Passover day with the redemption sacrifices, leading up to the night to be much observed, so they could celebrate the night to be much observed as the night that they were leaving. Okay? So it accomplished two things. One, redeemed the firstborn. And of course, there were other sacrifices during Feast of Unleavened Bread to do it, because you couldn't do it all at the same time. Number two, it is a commemoration of leaving Egypt, not the passing over of the houses of the children of Israel. Verse 6, but at the place which the Lord your God shall choose to place his name in, there you shall sacrifice the Passover offering at sunset, at the going down of the sun, at the time you came out of Egypt. See? So this identifies the Passover offering as something different than the Passover sacrifice. And you shall boil. Exodus 12 says, you shall not boil. So this is entirely different. And eat it in the place which the Lord your God shall choose, and in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. So what did they do on the night to be much observed? They stayed up all night. See? It's different than from today. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly to you, or to the Lord your God. You shall do no work. All right? Now then, let's look at the New Testament. Now here the translators messed it up as well. Let's first of all come to Matthew 26. Now this shows that even though in the majority of places in the Bible the King James translators did an acceptable job, but here, not knowing anything about the holy days of God, they messed it up. Okay? Now let's read it. Verse 2, Matthew 26. And you know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Okay? After 2 days. Now, if you have the Passover book, and also the Bible, and also the day Jesus the Christ died, you can see that flow of the last 10 days of the life of Jesus. Now let's come to Mark 14. Let's see what we have here. Okay, Mark 14, verse 1. After 2 days was the feast of the Passover and of unleavened bread. Okay, so it shows that it's different. They have that fairly correct here. All right. Now let's come to Luke 22. Okay, Luke 22, verse 1. Now here's where they mess it up. Luke 22, verse 1. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called the Passover. However, as we will see when we read these in the faithful version, that the feast of, in Luke 22, the word feast is not there. Now, what I did is translated literal translation. So let's go back to Matthew 26 and let's read it. Matthew 26, verse 2, quote of Jesus, you know that after 2 days the Passover takes place, and the Son of Man is delivered up to be crucified. Okay? When was he betrayed? Midnight on the Passover night. Now that's interesting, isn't it? When were the firstborn in Egypt of the Egyptians killed? Midnight. And God passed over the children of Israel, correct? Okay. But here, at midnight on the Passover day, Jesus' last Passover, God did not spare him. He did not spare his firstborn. See? Now let's come to Mark, 14th chapter. When we get there, hold your place because we'll come back. Verse 1. Now after 2 days was the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how they might stealthily lay hold of him and kill him. Okay? Now then, let's come to Luke 22. Then we'll come back to Mark 14. Luke 22. Here's where the confusion is. Now the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is called Passover, was approaching. That's where the confusion comes in. Okay? And actually, when it comes to the day, come down here to verse 7, Luke 22. Then came the day of unleavens, the day of the unleavens. Okay? No feast is there. King James has feast inserted there. But it's not there. Is it there, Jack?
Yeah,
Okay.
So
Okay. Now this is before Jesus took the Passover, right? Right? Yes. Okay. Then came the day of the unleavens, in which it was obligatory to kill the Passover lambs. Okay. Now, let's come back to Mark 14, and let's see something very important here that Mark recorded. Okay. And this helps clear up everything. Okay? Now then, verse 12. And on the first day of the unleavens. Now notice the next phrase. This is a literal translation from the Greek. When they were killing. Killing the Passover lambs is before the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? Okay. So let's stop and think about this a minute. When they were in Egypt and they had the Passover there, they were to eat what kind of bread? Unleavened bread, right? Okay. Now, it doesn't tell us whether they put out the leaven or not, but they were to have everything packed up and ready to go. So that means, because it said that they ate unleavened bread because they didn't have time for it to leaven, which means that the Passover day was an unleavened bread day. Okay? And that's what this is telling us. It's the first day of the year of unleavens. Now, how did they collect the leaven? Now, remember, we read there in Exodus 13, it's not to be in any of your borders. How do you get rid of leaven in a whole town? Huh? Well, the way they did it, they had men come around with special tubs on wheels that everyone would bring their leaven out, and they had a fire going in these tubs, and they would burn it. Okay? So this tells us that the Passover day is a day of unleavened bread. Now think on this for a minute. Years ago, they used to tell us, you keep the Passover with unleavened bread. But on the day portion of the Passover, you could still go get a hamburger. Okay? And the question would come up, since unleavened bread is the sinless body of Christ, and we take that on the Passover night, why would we get up and go to McDonald's or go to a restaurant and have toast? You see, that's leavened. And then start the Feast of Unleavened Bread. See? No, Mark 12 is telling us very clearly the Passover day is a day of unleavened bread, separate from and in addition to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, Think on the completion of this. The feast of God start with the Passover. First day, right? Okay. Then the last feast we have is Tabernacles, and one more day called the 8th day, or the last great day. So we have a separate day to start and a separate day to finish. The bookends of God's holy day season. Okay? That's quite a thing, the way it's laid out. All right? Now notice, let's read on. Verse 12. On the first day of the unleavened, when they were killing the Passover lambs. What is this telling us? Where were they? They were up on the top of Mount Olives, coming down into the city. And there were a lot of pilgrims out there with their tents. And so this tells us that all of those pilgrims had a lamb they were killing for the Passover. Huh? Just like they did in Numbers 9. Okay? No mention of the temple, correct? Is there a mention of the temple here? No. Okay? Let's go on. Let's see where Jesus kept the Passover. Let's see what he told the disciples. Did he tell them to go to the temple and sacrifice a lamb? No, he did not. See? So his disciples said to him, "Where do you desire that we go and prepare so that you may eat the Passover?" And he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city, go to the temple, find a priest, take your lamb, get it sacrificed." No, he didn't say that. He said this, "Go into the city, and you shall meet a man carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. And in whatever house he shall enter, say to the master of the house that the teacher says, 'Where's the guest chamber where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?'" Okay? So, this tells us what? The Passover day is an unleavened bread day, right? Okay? There we are. Show you a large upper room furnished. Okay? You can read the rest of it. Now, what can we deduce from this? If everything was ready to go, and all they had to do was the setup, this indicates that the master of the house was already roasting the lamb by the time they came. So it would be all ready, see? Now, can you imagine the angels that were busy guiding everything to get this done the way it should be done? Okay? Who inspired the man to have the house? See? To set it up and have it ready, though he had nobody to come and keep the Passover. See? I imagine that on that Passover day, it was filled with angels and Satan and the demons. And, verse 15, he shall show you a large upper room furnished and ready, there prepare for us. Okay? Now then, let's come to John 18. Let's see something else. Because here we find that the religious leaders kept a 15th Passover. Not all of them, but a majority of them. Okay? Verse 28, now then, they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the judgment hall. Okay? Now, they came from where the Sanhedrin met to condemn him. Okay? And when the high priest said, "Tell us, are you the Son of God?" And he said, "You have said it. And henceforth you shall see the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven." And what did the high priest do? He ripped his clothes, and everybody started blaspheming him. What should they have done? They should have all gotten on their knees and worshiped him and accepted him. See? That's what they should have done, because Jesus told them, if you believe Moses, you would have believed me. See? So they took him over to Pontius Pilate. Verse 28. Now then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the judgment hall. That's where Pontius Pilate was. And it was early. But they did not go into the judgment hall. Why? Okay. First of all, judgment hall was what? Roman territory. That would be like going to another country. Okay. But here's why they didn't do it. So that they would not be defiled, that is, made unclean, but that they might eat the Passover. Did Jesus eat the Passover the night before? Yes. Okay. So this tells us during the days of Jesus, there were those who kept the Passover on the 14th, domestic. There were those who kept the Passover on the 15th with a temple sacrifice. And the temple sacrifice, you need to read the Passover book to find out that the maximum number of sacrifices they could have had was 18,000 lambs. How do you square that with Josephus writing that they had so many Jews there at the Passover before the Romans started to encircle Jerusalem? They had killed over 250,000 for the Passover. But that was for the whole Feast of Unleavened Bread. 8 days, that's 30,000 a day. Now, 30,000, we can't imagine. See? And I got all the statistics and Edersheim talking about it, and the most we could come up with was 18,000 lambs could be slain during the time that they had allotted for it. One other thing that they did, and we'll finish with this. Okay? When the Passover day fell on the Sabbath, the temple sacrifices for the Passover lamb were not anywhere near the evening. See, the Jews counted evening, say, like from 3 p.m. on. Okay? But when it was on the Sabbath, they started sacrificing the Passover lambs at 1 in the afternoon for their temple sacrifice, Passover. Okay? Now, I know all of this may give you a headache. And I know it's difficult to grasp some of it. But I can tell you, it took me a long time before I understood between Exodus 13 and Deuteronomy 16 talking about the same thing. Okay? So, I know there are many other things I could talk about. But the most important thing is that we keep the Passover, and we keep it on the right day, and we keep it at the right time as Jesus commanded us, and we reaffirm and renew the new covenant of eternal life. And don't you think eternal life is important? That we do it right? Huh? Yes. So we'll finish with that.